Welcome to Verge File.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. She stood in the doorway with her suitcase already zipped, her tone calm, like she was asking for a grocery list. I think we need a week apart, just to reset. Not divorce, not therapy, just space. A test, she called it. Said it wasn't about someone else. Said it was just her, needing time. I didn't argue, didn't ask questions, didn't beg. I just nodded, stepped aside, and watched her leave like she was heading to a retreat, not walking out on a marriage. But the moment the door closed, something inside me shifted. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. She thought I'd spend that week waiting, reflecting, wondering how to fix things. She didn't realize her decision freed me. Because any woman who tests a marriage by disappearing isn't looking for answers. She's gambling on your loyalty. And I don't play games when it comes to commitment. For too long, I'd been her constant, her fallback, her emotional storage unit. She'd pull away when it suited her, go cold when attention gave her power, then crawl back when the silence felt too loud. I tolerated it, thought that was love, enduring the storm in hopes of sunlight. But the second she walked out that door, the storm ended. And what came next wasn't rain. It was stillness. And in that stillness, I remembered who I was before I started shrinking to fit her moods. Day one, I cleaned out the bedroom. Not spitefully, strategically. Cleared the closet space. Packed her drawers into labeled bins. Left only my essentials. Then I opened the windows. Let the air shift. Let the weight leave. I didn't text her. Didn't check her socials. Didn't ask where she went. Because if she needed space to figure things out, I'd give her more than she expected. By the end of that first day, she texted, "Hope your day was okay." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I was busy remembering how peace felt before she taught me to call tension normal. And that was the moment she realized. I wasn't waiting for her return. I was preparing for her absence. The silence wasn't heavy. It was clean. She probably expected I'd spend that first night pacing, staring at my phone, replaying every argument we ever had. But there was no drama, no panic, just space. The kind of space that lets you see everything clearly, especially the lies you've let live in your own house. I sat on the couch, stared at the blank TV screen, and realized how long it had been since I'd done anything without filtering it through her reactions. What would she think? Would this make her upset? Should I say something or stay quiet? That loop had lived in my head for years. But tonight, the loop broke. I ordered food. Slept early. No checking the door. No waiting for footsteps in the hall. I slept better than I had in months. Because when someone leaves pretending they just need a week to think, they're not expecting you to use that time to heal. They expect you to pause your life until they decide to hit play again. But I wasn't pausing. I was building momentum. The next morning, I made coffee. Sat outside. Watched the sun crawl over the edge of the fence. No noise. No corrections. No cold shoulder waiting behind the door. And it hit me. Peace isn't dramatic. It's subtle. It's the absence of being watched. The absence of walking on eggshells. The absence of a woman who saw partnership as power, not connection. She texted again that day. Said she was journaling, trying to understand what went wrong. Still, no reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I had nothing to add to a conversation she started with a suitcase. By the second night, I started moving her things to the garage. Every item had weight. Not physical, emotional. Gifts she gave with guilt. Notes written to fix what words broke. They all went in boxes. I labeled each one by room, by memory. She wanted time? I gave her permanence. And with each sealed box, a new part of me came back online. The version of myself that didn't beg, didn't negotiate, didn't lose sleep over someone else's confusion. That night, I looked in the mirror and said it, quietly, like a contract with myself. I'm not waiting. By day 3, I stopped wondering where she was. That question, where is she, used to burn holes through my thoughts. Late nights, ignored messages, emotional withdrawals she never explained. Now, I didn't care. Because her absence stopped being an event. It became architecture, a structure I could build my peace on. I spent the morning rearranging the living room. Not out of boredom, but intent. Shifted the couch. Replaced the rug. Took down the photo of us at the lake house. That photo used to remind me of warmth. Now, it reminded me of pretending. Smiles posed for friends. Arms draped like everything was fine. But it wasn't. She had checked out of this marriage long before she walked out with a suitcase. I was just the last to admit it. After the rearrangement, the house felt bigger. Not emptier, clearer. Her texts continued. Day 3. Thinking of you today. Hope you're good. Day 4. Would love to talk before the week's over. If you're open to it. Still, no reply. Because her messages weren't about me. They were about control. She expected the distance to make me chase. Instead, it made me notice how far I'd already gone emotionally. That week apart, it wasn't a break. It was a reveal of how much of my identity had been wrapped in keeping peace with someone who confused control with communication. I opened a storage unit that evening. Not to move out. To clear out. Her boxes went in first. Then the old souvenirs, the ones that used to mean something. The anniversary gifts she bought last minute. The framed note she once left on my desk that said, "Thanks for putting up with me." It was meant to be cute. It felt like a confession now. I didn't put a lock on the unit. Didn't need to. Because I wasn't hiding anything. I was letting go. That night, I sat on the floor in an empty living room, drank water from a plain glass, and didn't miss her voice. That silence she left me with, it was starting to sound like freedom. By the 5th day, I no longer needed to remind myself not to answer her messages. It became automatic, like breathing. When someone's silence used to cause anxiety, but now it feels like oxygen, you know the bond has cracked. And not from some sudden explosion. From erosion. Year after year of pretending we're just in a rough patch, while she slowly built her escape route in her head. And when she finally walked out the door, she expected me to be waiting with a flashlight, hoping she'd find her way back. Instead, I stopped looking in her direction. That morning, I boxed up the photos on the wall. Each one had a caption burned into memory. Our first vacation. Her birthday dinner. A wedding in Tahoe. All of them had one thing in common. My eyes always looked tired. Not from travel. From carrying the weight of one-sided effort. I replaced them with new frames, blank for now. Empty on purpose. Space for what's next. I started rebuilding my routines. Made breakfast for myself for the first time in weeks. Without rushing, without sharing. Went to the gym. No explanations. No text check-ins. Freedom didn't feel loud. It felt deliberate. Like every step was mine again. And then, day 5, she called. Didn't leave a voicemail. Just the notification. One missed call. It felt like a test. Like she wanted to see if I'd crack. If I'd break the silence just to prove I was still holding on. But I wasn't. And for the first time, I didn't need to prove anything. To her. To myself. To anyone. I started a new journal that evening. Not for tracking pain, but clarity. Wrote the first page like a contract. Your exit was my permission. And it was permission to stop performing. To stop hoping the version of her I fell for would return. She wasn't coming back. And I wasn't waiting. By the 6th morning, my mind didn't drift toward her. No mental countdown of days passed. No wondering what she was thinking. Something had settled. Not peace. Not anger. Just distance. The kind that can't be crossed again. I cleaned out the last of her things from the bathroom. Drawer by drawer, shelf by shelf. Hair ties, half-used lotion, notes scribbled on receipts. All of it went into the same cardboard box. I wasn't doing it to erase her. I was doing it to reclaim the space. She once said, "This is still our home." But you don't abandon something and still get to call it yours. She hadn't just walked out for air. She'd created a vacuum, expecting I'd fill it with apologies, questions, maybe even flowers. Instead, I filled it with silence. Not the passive kind. The kind that says, "This chapter is closed, even if you don't know it yet." Around noon, her name lit up my screen again. A text this time. "Let's talk soon. I miss us." But she didn't miss me. She missed control. Missed the version of me who waited for her to change moods like weather. Missed the comfort of my patience, my consistency. But she forgot. A man who finally chooses himself doesn't ask for weather reports anymore. He steps outside and builds shelter. That afternoon, I opened the drawer where I kept the wedding ring. Slid it on one last time. Not for sentiment. For recognition. This was the symbol I wore during years of compromise. Then I took it off. Placed it back down. Closed the drawer slowly. Felt nothing. And that was the point. Her experiment had backfired. She wanted to see what I'd do if she left. But what I did wasn't panic. It was rebuild. That night, I took a walk. Alone. No headphones. No destination. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel watched. Didn't feel judged. Didn't feel married to someone already gone. I was free. And this time, I knew how to stay that way. Day 7. Exactly 1 week since she left to clear her head. She hadn't expected silence. She expected hesitation, regret, a crack in the armor. But all she found was distance. That morning, she showed up unannounced. I was on the porch, coffee in hand, wearing the same clothes I wore when she left. Not out of nostalgia, out of focus. She stood there, bags under her eyes, looking at me like she didn't recognize who I'd become. Maybe she didn't, because the man she left behind would have rushed down those steps, arms open, voice shaking. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who had tasted peace and refused to let it go. She said she just wanted to talk. I didn't move, didn't invite her in. She looked past me, toward the house. Noticed the empty spaces where photos used to hang. Her tone shifted. Did you really pack my things? Still, I said nothing. Because when someone walks out thinking they're in control, the worst thing you can do to them is remain calm when they return. She started crying. And I watched. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Because those tears weren't about love. They were about losing leverage. About realizing the person she left had stopped orbiting around her moods. She kept saying we could rebuild. That everyone deserves a second chance. But she'd already used hers. The night she tested my loyalty by leaving. The weeks she chipped away at my confidence with silence and sarcasm. The moments she made me feel like a burden for wanting connection. All of that was her choice. And now, I was making mine. I stood up, walked past her, unlocked the front door, but didn't open it. Just looked at her once and said, "Your things are in the garage." Then I went inside and closed the door behind me. No slam, no anger, just finality. And for the first time since our vows, I didn't look back. Because when someone makes you a backup plan, the strongest move isn't revenge. It's removal. She didn't text that night. Not because she respected my silence, but because she didn't know how to handle it. For the first time in years, she had no access. No keys. No control. No certainty that I'd forgive her like I always had. And the weight of that silence? It wasn't peaceful for her. It was punishment. One I never intended to deliver, but one she earned. Because that's what happens when someone turns love into a test. Eventually, the test gets handed back, with every box left unchecked. I spent that night working. Late into the evening. Emails, projects, plans. Everything she once called distractions now became my fuel. Not because I was avoiding emotions, but because I'd finally prioritized myself. That's what they don't understand. When you stop fighting for someone who made you beg for breadcrumbs, you don't become heartless. You become whole. She didn't come by the next day. No calls. Just a single message. Did you really mean it? I didn't reply, because what she really meant was, are you still waiting for me to feel ready? I wasn't. I had stopped waiting the moment I realized I had nothing more to prove. The garage stayed locked. Her things untouched. Because returning them now would be an act of service. A courtesy. And some lessons have to be learned in stillness. That weekend, I repainted the bedroom. New walls. New bedding. Neutral tones. Everything about it felt deliberate. Not to erase her, but to remove the ghost she left behind. I slept better that night. Not longer. Just deeper. Because peace doesn't come from noise. It comes from knowing you've finally ended the cycle. And she faded. Not dramatically. Not with screams or scenes. But in the quiet way people disappear when they no longer hold the strings. And I didn't chase that silence. I welcomed it. Because in the end, the loudest goodbye is the one you never have to say. By the 10th day, I'd stopped checking my phone altogether. Not because I was forcing distance, but because I didn't need confirmation anymore. Her silence wasn't mysterious. It was calculated. A delay tactic. She was waiting for me to flinch. Waiting for the pattern to resume. The old one, where I'd bend first. But something had shifted too far for that. I wasn't angry. I was indifferent. And there's a difference. Anger still seeks reaction. Indifference doesn't check if the door's locked. It replaces the entire house. That morning, I went to the gym for the first time in months. Not out of revenge. Out of ritual. Each rep, each set, felt like reclaiming something that had quietly been taken. Time. Strength. Identity. She used to roll her eyes at my early workouts, called them escapes. Now, I understood, she didn't hate the gym. She hated what it gave me. Clarity, discipline, power. Things she couldn't manipulate. When I got home, there was a note taped to the front door. Written in her handwriting. No envelope. just folded once, like it didn't need formality. Inside, 2 sentences. I'm sorry for everything. I still love you. That was it. No explanation. No accountability. Just emotional bait. She was hoping I'd grab it. Out of memory, out of nostalgia, out of weakness. I didn't. I folded the note and placed it in the trash without ceremony. Because when someone writes, "I still love you," after trying to break you, it's not a confession. It's a trap, and I wasn't stepping into it. That evening, I sat on the porch again. Same chair, same view, different posture. No more waiting, no more questions. Just air, evening sun, and a man who had finally remembered who he was before he gave her everything. The test she created? She failed it. And the cost wasn't me leaving. It was me never coming back. 11 days. That's how long it took for the echoes to stop. Her voice in my head, her perfume on the sheets, the trace of her footsteps through my memory. Gone. Not erased. Outgrown. There's a difference. Erasure is desperate. Outgrowing is deliberate. I didn't need to hate her. I just needed to outgrow the version of me that loved her more than himself. That morning, I opened my laptop and booked a one-way flight. Not to escape, to expand. The city we lived in felt like a museum. Every street corner, every coffee shop, every grocery store aisle whispered her name. I wasn't afraid of those ghosts. I was just done walking through a haunted version of my life. When I told my brother I was leaving, he didn't ask why. He just said, "Good. That's when you know you've been gone for too long, from yourself." Even the people who love you start celebrating your return. I donated the last of her things. Didn't box them. Didn't sort them. Just let go. Some of them were expensive. Didn't matter. The most valuable thing I had reclaimed was time. And I wasn't trading it for closure. She texted again that night. "Are you really doing this?" I didn't reply. Because that message wasn't a question. It was fear. Fear that her name no longer made my heart shift. Fear that I wouldn't come back. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. That night, I slept on a bare mattress. No sheets. No pillowcases. Just me in a quiet room. And I slept better than I had in months. Because freedom doesn't come with comfort. It comes with certainty. Certainty that you've stopped bleeding for someone who never learned how to heal. And the next morning, I walked out of that house, locked the door behind me, and didn't look back. Not because I was angry, because I had nothing left to retrieve. When you finally remember who you are, there's nothing to mourn. Only ground to reclaim. The last time I saw her, it wasn't a scene. No tears. No apologies. No promises. Just a look. Empty. She waited for me to say something. Anything. I didn't. Because everything I could say, I'd said in silence. In every box packed. In every door locked. In every night spent alone, choosing myself over what used to be. I left the house that day. No dramatic goodbye. No, I'm sorry. Just the quiet conviction of a man who realized some battles aren't worth fighting. I didn't vanish. I withdrew. Slowly. Purposefully. Because when a man stops playing a part in someone else's story, it's not absence. It's freedom. Months passed. She sent messages I never opened. Friends asked if I was okay. I was better than okay. I was whole. One night, I deleted our last text thread. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I was done remembering. I'm not the man who begged for crumbs. I'm the man who walked away when the table was empty. When she called months later, I let it ring. No regrets. No explanations. Just the sound of a door closing softly. And I didn't look back. Because the strongest revenge is peace. And the loudest goodbye is silence. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe. This is where we talk about what doesn't get forgiven.